Hello there, namaste. This is the Ahom Kingdom, how Thai migrants built a Northeast Indian superpower. Is that right? Yeah, that's what it says. I had no clue about that, but yeah,
The history of India's Northeast is cloaked in mystery, fueled by stories of dark magic and tribal warriors.
Okay. And the fact that there is like a little racial tension in like the eastern part of India because they don't look like other Indians, but then again, everyone in different territories looks a bit different because the closer you are over there, they look more. I guess the term, the racial term would be, racist term would be, not Middle Eastern, would be Asian, even though, well, a majority of Asia is Russia, which it's. Yeah, but yeah, they have those stereotypical Asian features, for lack of a better. I don't know a better. What is a better word for that? Oriental? I don't think that'd be a better word for it. I don't know. I don't know a good word for it, but yeah.
Sometimes feels exotic and out of reach, but not today. In true Odd Compass fashion, we're going to shine a light on a history that has remained in the shadows for far too long. Meet the region's greatest power, the Ahom Kingdom. One of the most fascinating in Indian history. Theirs is a remarkable tale of migration, dynastic ambition, and courage in the face of extraordinary danger. For despite many challenges, the Ahom dominated Northeast India for nearly 600 years, humiliated the Mogul Empire, and left a lasting legacy that survives to this very day.
It's always nice to hear when a small power can literally humiliate a dominating power. Like the Roman Empire when it gets showed up by some barbarian culture, or the Mongolians were shown up by a small community, or Alexander the Great was fought off even though his soldiers were tired at that point, but he just kept moving and moving south, and then he finally got run out. It's always, there's something about that. It's the underdog story, even though it's interesting to kind of follow these stories. And I really wish that the great Library of Alexandria never burned down, because imagine the knowledge he harvested from around the world, that he took like all kinds of literature from everywhere he conquered and moved it into the Library of Alexandria. I think that's what it was called. And then it burned to the ground. All those documents. Imagine how much we could know now that was lost because he basically pillaged it all to keep it in one place. So again, it was his own fault.
This is their story. Today's narrative begins in the medieval era, but not in India. Not yet. Let's turn our attention further east, to the wealthy frontier region of Yunnan, the original homeland of the ethnic Thai group that would later become the Ahom. Yunnan was in the perfect location for commerce, at the crossroads of several overland trade routes connecting India, Tibet, Southeast Asia, and China. And so, by the 13th century, the Ahom parent kingdom in Yunnan, better known as Muang Mao, had prospered. It helped that the Ahom had close ethno-linguistic ties to other groups scattered throughout the region, in both Thailand and Burma. But everything was about to change, and fast. The 13th century was a turbulent period across much of Asia, so too in Muang Mao. The relentless aggression of the Mongol Empire disrupted trade routes and destabilized the political landscape. Meet the crown prince of Muang Mao, Sukapa. In the midst of all this 13th century chaos, the crown prince was suddenly passed over for the throne. See, King Pung had no male heirs, and so he nominated Sukapa, his nephew, as his heir. But just a few years before the king died, he finally had a son of his own. The keys to the kingdom were handed over to Sukapa's young cousin, thus removing him from the line of succession. The details of this event are unclear, and speculation runs rampant. Though he disagreed with the decision, Sukapa did not actually challenge his cousin's ascension to the throne. Perhaps it was his grandmother's counsel that steadied him.
You know, it's funny. It always takes. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that he didn't go out and he probably just became a mentor for his nephew, right? It takes a woman to talk them off of it, to basically bring the emotional tether. We're very logical beings, and again, we're very narcissistic beings that we think we know better. And especially, he's the adult, he's the mature one, he thinks he could rule the kingdom better than a small child. The female the elderly woman is basically talking to him, talking with him and with emotion, with passion, letting him know that he probably isn't all that, but says it with love. It really takes a woman in your life to let you know, or a very flamboyant man in your life to let you know that that you need to ground yourself. You need to not be so think that you're everything to every situation. I mean, I'm stubborn and think I can take care of every problem myself, and then I end up having to pay someone to fix my mistakes as well as the issue I did trying to the original issue, and then also pay to fix my mistakes of when I tried to do something. But when it comes to things like woodworking or like a few things in cars, I know how to do that kind of stuff, changing tires, oil, you know, the bare minimum stuff I know how to do myself. But when it comes to like something like electrical repair, I do it myself. In most cases, I know how to do it. But sometimes you're working like with the circuit box and things like that, where I could make an oopsie and the whole thing could go down. You blow several fuses, and then you have to get someone. I'm going off topic, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. You need someone there to convince you that you can't do it. Just take the hit of pride and hire someone.
Sukapa's grandmother is believed to have said, just as no two tigers can live in the same jungle, no two kings can sit on the same throne. And so Sukapa accepted that if he were to make something of himself, it would have to be in a new country, a place where he could rebuild his destiny. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Sukapa sought to plant the seed of a new kingdom, a fresh start.
It's funny how it's Journey to the West, because okay, so what is the book? It's always compared with like the Iliad and the Odyssey. Journey to the West is the in China. It's more of the how the structure of Eastern, like when you go into like writing, and I took a writing major. So when you go into writing, they try to tell you the difference between like the Eastern culture and writing. And like India has the same kind of Eastern kind of style of storytelling as most of, well, the East. And then the West is more of like the Iliad and the Odyssey, where it's done in that sort of narrative dynamic. And it's funny how it's Journey to the West, and going to the West is going to India, which me in the West think India's in the East. And it's just... Well, it's funny because when I fly to India, I have to fly west in order to get to it. But yeah. It's funny how, because the more you are in one direction, it's like, yeah. I digress. I just find that interesting how they keep referencing going to India as West, when nowadays anyone who thinks West, they don't think, like if you're in Japan or China, when they think West, I don't think they're even thinking of India. I don't think they probably even think of Europe at that point. When everyone thinks West, they probably just think of the dorks here in America, just because, well, we're not that bright.
Rumors traveled fast among the caravan merchants funneling into Muang Mao. Sukapa learned that a once prominent empire, Kamarupa, had lost its grip over the Brahmaputra Valley in northeast India. Sukapa could not afford to miss out on this opportunity. The Brahmaputra Valley was not only fertile and naturally protected by mountains, but it was also, like Muang Mao, connected to a vibrant trade network. But Sukapa needed settlers who understood his vision. A keen diplomat, he secured the allegiance of 5 Ahom lords. These lords brought with them warriors, priests, merchants, and, of course, peasants to labor and work the land. In total, the migrants numbered more than 9,000.
He brought an entire
Together, they had the
population.
resources to support a long and uncertain journey. In 1215 CE, they set off for India. Over the next 13 years, the Ahom marched through Burma and towards northeast India, using diplomacy to secure safe passage through foreign territory. But sometimes they encountered opposition to their presence. In 1227 CE, for example, they brutally subjugated the tribesmen at Nanyang Lake. Whether through military victory or diplomacy, the Ahom established a series of subordinate states in their wake, known as Mongs. Sukapa would assign some of his loyal followers to stay behind and lead while fulfilling specific strategic goals. For example, the Mong established at Nanyang Lake was for guarding the route back to Yunnan. In any case, the Ahom kept moving forward. So it was after 13 long years that the Ahom finally crossed the Patkai Mountains and entered the Brahmaputra Valley, located in what is today the Indian state of Assam. The kingdom was officially born. Sukapa must have been relieved, for the Brahmaputra Valley was just as they had envisioned. Just one problem. It was home to powerful tribal polities, some of whom saw the migrant Ahom as a potential threat. Remember those piping hot rumors about the collapse of Kamarupa power in northeast India? Turns out the rumors were true. That, my friends, is the sound of a newly formed power vacuum. Competition was fierce among the Brahmaputra Valley tribes, many of whom had previously served as Kamarupa feudatories. Sukapa and his advisors took decisive action yet again. They staked their claims in between the Damasa Kachari and Shutia tribal kingdoms, in a marshy area of the valley. They also sought to establish good relations with various tribal groups, especially the Barahi and the Maran. Sukapa further strengthened these bonds by marrying the daughters of the Barahi and Maran chiefs and encouraging population intermixing. Thanks to these successful diplomatic relations, they
marriage is always used for political gain. That's funny how even now, that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. You think you make progress in getting away from that and you actually vote people in, that you have the say in voting people in. And then, like again, I'm sorry to keep using America, but it's what I know the most of. And then you actually look at the family tree of all the politicians in the US and realize they're all related to each other. Oh, this is the cousin of this person here who married a relative of this person here, and this person is the daughter or son of a multi-billionaire in order to get the finances to run for this thing here. It's a joke. It's a joke. You think you get away from that blue blood mentality, only to realize you just stumble into it. I think I say this in every video now. Power corrupts.
gained a foothold in the region. Over the next 3 decades, Sukapa and his followers moved from place to place within the valley, converting forests and marshes into thriving wet rice cultivation sites.
Nice.
They established several Hmong colonies until finally settling a capital in 1253 CE. The boundaries of the kingdom were starting to take shape. But while the land was less populated, many local Naga tribes were averse to the idea of a foreign power occupying their lands. Conflict between the Ahom and hostile Naga was inevitable. The Ahom-Naga conflicts, both large-scale wars and tribal rebellions, continued for more than 2 centuries. It was a constant back and forth. The Naga had the advantage of greater numbers and better knowledge of the terrain, while the Ahom had the advantage of superior military technology and tactics. Sukapa's alliances in the region proved especially useful during these early conflicts, as it gave his people access to critical support and resources. But according to some accounts, it was the use of war elephants that gave the Ahom a decisive advantage. The Ahom were skilled in capturing and training elephants, and they used them to devastating effect. Naga tribesmen were not prepared to counter the large-scale use of elephants in battle. Over time, the Ahom outmaneuvered and overcame the resistance of the Naga tribes. The Ahom could finally shift their focus towards expanding their nascent state.
But 200 years to get to that point? So the original ruler is no longer there. That's the thing. It's hard to fathom this kind of stuff because you have the person who has the vision. He brings his people to the location. They finally establish themselves in that location and end up in a 200-year war. He doesn't make it to the very end. His vision dies with him. But how did it become? Maybe he would have honestly never allied with India. Maybe he would have established his own kingdom, because remember, that's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a ruler. He wanted his own kingdom, and he had it. But they probably couldn't maintain the foothold or whatever, that they decided to ally and become a state of India. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense. It had to be one of the descendants at that point.
When the Ahom arrived in northeast India, they were just a small group in a hostile foreign land. To strengthen and consolidate their position, they employed an assimilative process called Ahomisation. Ahomisation involved the gradual absorption of local groups into Ahom society through political alliances, intermarriage, and sociocultural exchange. Over time, various ethnic and tribal groups were successfully integrated: the Barahi, the Maran, and even many Naga tribes. Ahomisation worked because to become an Ahom conferred many advantages. Conquered nobles were given high-ranking positions, and local kinship groups were accorded the same level of power and respect as Ahom noble house.
See, that's something you like to hear. The fact that they're intermingling and everyone is seen as equal. They're not seen as less than because of the color of their skin or the look of their eyes or they're one's taller than the other or whatever it is. No, they're all seen as equal. You become a part of the group. You're accepted 100% into the group.
The Ahom also introduced new technologies that significantly improved quality of life, such as the technique of wet rice cultivation. This agricultural technique was so transformative in Northeast India that the Ahom literary chronicles considered it a gift of the gods. But history has a way of changing things. The 16th century saw the Ahom expand along the Brahmaputra River, conquering the Shutya kingdom in 1523 CE, among other territories. This brought millions of Sanskritized Hindus under Ahom rule. The Ahom were now so greatly outnumbered in their own kingdom that the one-way imposition of Southeast Asian norms, Ahomisation, was no longer feasible. Instead, a reverse process began. The Ahom were finally becoming Indianized. Consider the impact on Ahom religion and language. When they arrived in the subcontinent, the Ahom were largely animist, following a religion known as Pralung. They practiced ancestor worship and venerated objects that were believed to house spirits. And though the Ahom did integrate tantric Buddhist elements into Pralung, the core of their beliefs remained Thai. But the demographic shift in the 16th century shook things up. Soon enough, it was Hinduism, not Pralung, that would come to dominate the religious landscape of the kingdom. And during the reign of King Susungpa in the early 17th century, Hinduism was made the official state religion. That being said, elements of Pralung did survive the adoption of Hinduism and were adapted. It was during Susungpa's reign also that the Ahom language was gradually replaced by Assamese as the language of the court, and Sanskritized Hindu names were given to the nobility in addition to their Thai names. King Susungpa, for example, was better known as Pratap Singha. The administration of the Ahom kingdom,
again, they're revising history in order to make it sound more appeasing to the people so that they accept it a little more.
Is best characterized by the
I don't know if I'm for that or against that.
establishment of uniquely Southeast Asian institutions. These institutions mirrored the background of the Ahom, who maintained much of their original Thai culture. Consider the Paik or Kel system of labor. The Paik system imposed a compulsory labor obligation on all able-bodied men between the ages of 15 and 50, with exceptions made for nobles, priests, and artisans. Each man was a Paik, and 4 Paiks formed a ghat. Each would be rotated through various work groups across the kingdom, and each work rotation would last around 3 months per year. While a Paik was on rotation, the other 3 members of their ghat would tend to their lands in their absence. In exchange for their service, Paiks were allowed a piece of land to cultivate. Though it had many flaws, the Paik system provided the state with a cheap and reliable source of labor, and it maintained social cohesion as it created bonds between the diverse peoples ruled by the Ahom.
Yeah.
Naturally, the
Positives
system
and
also
negatives.
gave rise to a flurry of construction. The Ahom built many fortified cities and palaces, temples, and monasteries, the greatest of which were grand structures made of brick and stone, boasting elaborate carvings and decorations. The Ahom also built many reservoirs to irrigate fallow land. This significantly boosted agricultural productivity. And they built a network of
Gosh, it's funny because they even understand how important a reservoir is, how important water is to building a community. California is building a high-speed rail when we're dealing with a drought because they refuse to build more dams. They refuse to build more water reservoirs for when we have heavy rainfall. That we end up in droughts for 10, 12, 20 years because they never thought, oh, we should build a dam to collect the water. We should build more reservoirs to collect the water. No, what we need is a high-speed rail to go from San Francisco to Bakersfield for some odd reason. Sorry, that's still pissing me off. They've been building that thing for close to 10 years now, and it's just like, we need water. Yes, we've had having a great rain pour the last 2 years here, but that doesn't last. Weather is fickle. It comes and goes. We'll end up in a drought probably again in 2-3 years after more heavy rainfall. Don't quote me on that, but I am predicting that. I'm soothsaying it, thinking it.
of roads and bridges to connect their population centers, facilitating migration and trade and commerce. Innovations were also made in the political realm. The Ahom implemented a form of leadership known as the Patra system. Under this system, each of the 5 great officers of the state were selected from one of the powerful noble houses. These officers had different functions. Some served as regional governors, and others served in a military capacity. But they were all advisors to the king. Later, these officers were organized into a council of ministers for the king, called the Patra Mantris. And one of the officers would be designated the Rajmantri, or prime minister, with additional responsibilities and powers. The Patra system was an important aspect of Ahom governance. Its purpose was to prevent any one official or faction from accumulating too much influence, and to ensure that power was distributed fairly among the various noble houses. Thus, by the dawn of the 17th century, more than 350 years after their arrival in India, the Ahom had developed their kingdom into a regional powerhouse. Ironically, the growing wealth and geopolitical importance of the Ahom painted a target on their back, for the Mogul Empire, already pushing into South India, now saw opportunity in the northeastern corridor. But the Ahom weren't about to go down without a fight. With the Mughal takeover of Bengal in the late 16th century, the Ahom were keenly aware of the risks posed by this new imperial power in their neighborhood. And so they took a proactive approach to defense. They built fortifications, trained up soldiers, and stockpiled weapons and munitions. And on their western front, they supported Coach Hajo, hoping that it would serve as a buffer state against further Mughal expansion. This buffer didn't last long. In 1614, the Mughals easily took Coach Hajo. Tensions ran high, for the Mughal Empire now directly bordered the Ahom kingdom. It was obvious that the Ahom were next in line for conquest. The Mughals searched for any excuse to attack, and so they sent merchants to illegally harvest agar wood in Ahom territory in the hopes that it would provoke a response. Spoiler alert, it did. The Ahom responded by capturing and executing several of the unauthorized merchants. This police action provided the pretext for war. In 1616 CE, the Mughal Empire used Bengali support.
I hate politics. They literally used those people as pawns, got them executed just so they could raid and attack.
Subordinates to invade the Ahom. But if you recall, the Ahom were well prepared. They pulled back to a better defensive position, holding their ground at the fortress city of Samrada. There at Samrada,
I do gotta add though, at least they wanted a pretense to attack instead of like some people which would just attack for no reason. They needed a pretense. Even though they forced it, they needed a pretense? Is that the word? They needed a reason to attack.
Ahom absolutely trounced the invading Mughal forces. Word of Ahom victory spread across the subcontinent. But the victory was incomplete. Over the next few decades, there was a relentless back and forth. Each side used both indirect and direct methods to secure an advantage, from trade restrictions to violent raids and prisoner exchanges. Fast forward to 1662, when Emperor Aurangzeb appointed Mir Jumla II Viceroy of Bengal. Aurangzeb entrusted him with the task of finally conquering the Ahom kingdom. Mir Jumla gathered a sizable naval fleet, which included Portuguese, Dutch, and English sailors, and pushed up the river Brahmaputra, first targeting the region of Kamrup. Initially, the Ahom offered almost no organized resistance. It was an unexpectedly weak defense, and so the Mughals took garrison after garrison, fortress after fortress. Emboldened by his victories, Mir Jumla swept into the Ahom capital, Gargaon, forcing the Ahom king to flee into the hills. The takeover greatly enriched the Mughal invaders with equipment and loot, but trouble was brewing for the Mughals. See, the monsoon season was fast approaching, and soon the Brahmaputra River would be unnavigable due to torrential rain.
They basically trapped them there. Oh my gosh, what is it in the art of war? Fear, so there's the tale of the man who left his doors open. Like he was in meetings with all the rulers were in meetings, all the generals were in meetings with each other, and this general was known as the strict one, the powerful one, like, you know your enemy. And he was outnumbered, he was outrated, but everyone knew him as like this person who did nothing without reason. And he was about to get raided, and he opened the front doors of the fortress he was a part of, and the people who were gonna attack him saw him literally sitting at the front of the gate, like lounging about. They left. Why? Because they knew who he was, they knew his history, and they knew he wouldn't do anything without reason. The gates were open, welcoming. They assumed it would be a trap. And it's just like, here the gates were open, Here the gates were welcoming, even though, of course, he used that as a chance to trick him in the art of war for knowing thy enemy, and he knew how his enemy would respond if he acted a certain way. Here, they just kept going straight in.
Mir Jumla suddenly found himself in a highly vulnerable position. He was now isolated from his relief forces downriver in Dhaka. What followed was a 6-month thrashing. The Ahom disrupted Mughal supply lines and launched endless hit-and-run attacks on enemy defensive positions. Then an epidemic broke out in the Mughal camps. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Ahom reclaimed significant territory. Still, the Mughal forces survived the monsoon season. Though battered, they remained in control of Gargaon and a few key areas. And by September, they were invigorated by fresh armies sent upriver from Dhaka. Worried that the fighting would continue, Jayadwaj Singha sued for peace. He was given back his capital but agreed to a substantial war indemnity and even sent 2 of his daughters to join the Mughal harem. It was a fragile and humiliating compromise. Enter King Chakradwaj Singha and his brilliant advisor and general, Lachit Borpukhan. Chakradwaj had a fiery spirit. Peace would not last for long, as he refused to pay any of the remaining war indemnity to the Mughals. According to Ahom records, he shouted from his throne, "Death is preferable to a life of subordination." Before the Mughals could adequately prepare, Ahom forces took back the Kamrup region and more, reclaiming territories all the way up to the old Mughal border. Aurangzeb was furious. He sent a Rajput commander, Ram Singh, to handle the situation in the northeast. For 4 years, conflict ensued, with peace talks interspersed, but the Mughals and their Rajput servants refused to offer a reasonable compromise. The cartoonishly arrogant Ram Singh.
It takes someone who knows that a life of freedom is better than servitude. It just, because that's the thing. I've mentioned it before, where people will easily take a life of servitude if it's seen as comfort. There is always those rare fews, and it's when they get into power and able to motivate the rest of the people that you're not free, you're just slaves, you're just they need to motivate the people, and it's always good to see them in positions of power. Sure, it probably led to several deaths of his people, but it at least they're standing strong.
Underestimated his Ahom opponents and thought that he could secure an all-out victory for his Mughal masters, and so he launched an attack while in the midst of peace negotiations. Thus began the Battle of Saraighat in 1671 CE. The Mughal forces under Ram Singh had superior numbers and superior technology, but there was a problem. While they fielded massive warships, the ships were not actually designed for river combat, nor were their soldiers trained for it. By contrast, the Ahom forces under Lachit Borpukhan had an intimate knowledge of the Brahmaputra River. As such, they fielded smaller, more maneuverable warboats that could navigate the river currents with ease. These boats enabled Ahom forces to move swiftly and strike the Mughal fleet from unexpected angles. And though Lachit was severely ill, he led from the front and pushed every possible advantage to win the battle. He employed unconventional tactics, even going so far as to release trained crocodiles into the river, creating panic and confusion among the Mughal ranks. The Ahom also used fire arrows to set it.
How do you train crocodiles? I've never seen that before. I have never even heard of that before. I mean, there's training elephants, there's training dogs, there's getting cats to actually like you and not want to eat you. There's training birds. There's, well, you can train like iguanas and bearded dragons. I guess you could train a crocodile, but I have never heard of that. I always just assumed it was like basically a shark, something that's completely soulless because you can look in a shark's eyes, beady, black, little teddy bear eyeballs, and no, there's no soul in there.
Enemy ships ablaze, splitting the attention of the Mughal officers and giving Ahom soldiers an opportunity to attack freely. Caught off guard by the Ahom's relentless attacks, they were thoroughly defeated at Saraighat. In the years that followed, there were many more skirmishes between the Ahom and Mughals, but none as significant as the fascinating Battle of Itakuli in 1682, where the Ahom used deception and psychological warfare to secure victory. See, the Ahom built several mock forts along the Mughals' path to Itakuli. These forts, built with cheap materials like bamboo and mud, were designed to appear like formidable defensive structures. The Mughals wasted valuable time and resources trying to capture these forts. And while doing so, they were constantly ambushed by Ahom forces, who were using hit-and-run tactics to inflict heavy casualties. The Mughals decided to withdraw, and the Ahom emerged victorious once again. But this time, long-term peace was secured. The Mughal Empire would no longer pose a threat in the northeast.
The fact that they have to give up, the fact that this small region that they'd been trying to take over, they have to go like, you know what, we're wasting so much time, so many lives, we just gotta cut our losses. Oh my gosh, imagine the embarrassment for a massive empire.
With the northeast now stabilized, the Ahom kingdom expanded rapidly, fully annexing its neighbors, the Damasa Kachari and Jaintia kingdoms. In fact, in the era after the Mughal conflicts, the Ahom went through something of a golden age, reaching their zenith in terms of territorial expansion and economic prosperity. But by the mid-18th century, a reform-oriented Hindu sect had spread like wildfire among the peasantry of the Ahom kingdom, promising them equal rights and opportunities. Attempts to suppress this new sect failed. Tensions soon erupted into a devastating civil war, the Moamoria Rebellion. The damage should not be underestimated. By the end of the century, the Ahom population reduced by a staggering 50%. Other powers sought to take advantage. The Burmese intervened in the early 19th century, and this was followed by a final takeover of the Ahom kingdom by the British. So it was in 1826 CE that the Ahom kingdom breathed its last.
And basically was that's the thing, it's like Britain basically made it a part of India. Oh my gosh, that's kind of tragic, that the fact that it was just one man who had a vision, he just wanted to rule, ended up, so they ruled, they did rule, it was its own empire for a long period of time, not until, because even they fought against the Mongols, but they lost to Britain of all things. But I know Britain came in with like the concept of trade. That was their in. They wanted to trade. They wanted to bring value, prosperity, you know, enrich. They separated communities. They made they did a lot of, like, again, psychological warfare, like what happened. But they did it all through the garbs of improvement, modernizing, because they had the Industrial Revolution and went far beyond like most of the other world, and just believed themselves superior. But yeah. That was actually interesting, how it was this own sect, and I've always known it as a part of India, and they just look different, so they're discriminated against because they look different, and even though they are Indian, but I guess they're still fresh Indians. They're newly birthed Indians. Yeah, probably one of the early, probably is one of the latest ones that have been, what is the word? Because it's not conquest. At that point, it wouldn't have been conquest, because Britain, it merged. It was merged with India, because after Britain kind of conquered it all, they put borders around everything, and then it all became known as just one location. Yeah, I found that interesting. I'm really enjoying these history ones. Some of it always sticks in my brain, and I remember it later, which is a good thing. It's good to always remember the little tidbits here and there. Some things I absolutely forget. When it comes to the dates, I'm not gonna lie, I'm completely lost. They have the CE, they have the BC, they have the AD. They have it says right here, the last thing it ended on was earthly 19th, whatever that is. But yeah, when it comes to dates, I'm completely lost. I've always enjoyed history. I mean, I find it fascinating in how much of the world has been done over and over and over again. Like you look at like the US now, and then you look at the state of Rome before it fell, and you can see a lot of similarities between how the people perceive themselves, how the morals are in a culture, and things like that. And then, well, what happened to Rome when everything started, well, before it fell? Well, it's a lot of the same thing that's happening here in the US of A. It's the moralities are going, it's interesting to, like I said, you gotta view history and learn from it and see see where we're going wrong, where we're going astray. But a lot of people now just don't want to learn from history because, again, they want to believe they're all unique and doing things for the first time ever. When anyone who's ever tried to write a story knows there is nothing you can ever write that is new. Just like with history, there's nothing you could ever do that is new and unique. Just like with the evolution of like technology, sure, that has allowed us, like the internet, the phones, things like that, but it doesn't change the fact that we've been able to communicate by letters. We've been able to communicate by talking. It's just a more advanced version of it. So in the end, we are doing the exact same things we've been doing for thousands of years, especially as a human peoples. And the sad thing is, we can learn from the past now. We can see it right in front of us and go like, maybe we shouldn't do this as a people. And we just don't. We refuse to accept. It's like, no, that was then, this is now. I'm a different person than those were. Just the narcissism that comes with us being humans. We all fall victim. We can lie to ourselves and say we don't, but we all fall victim. Yeah, I'm enjoying these. Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next time. Toodles.